Before they sat down to eat, Kim Jong-un and President Trump had about 20 minutes of one-on-one time. We don't know what exactly was discussed, but listen to how they described it.
We had exchanged very interesting dialogue with each other for about 30 minutes.
Boy, if you could have heard that dialogue, what you would.
So we've witnessed all the historic firsts of the Singapore summit. We've had the first big photo ops of this summit. Now it's time for the really tough negotiations to begin in earnest. If a serious agreement on denuclearization or some kind of peace treaty is actually going to come out of the summit here in Hanoi, then it's going to be taking place over the next few hours. Now, some possibilities include allowing inspectors to observe the dismantlement of North Korea's Yongbyon nuclear facility, opening liaison offices in the U.S. and North Korea, formally ending the Korean War, and possibly easing U.S. sanctions before North Korea fully denuclearizes. Now, there is a joint agreement signing ceremony on the official schedule. It's slated to take place at 2 a.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. local time here in Vietnam. White House officials so far won't say what exactly it is that they're going to be signing, perhaps because the details are still being hashed out. But, Martha, one thing's for sure, and that is that it's going to be a fascinating few hours here in Hanoi.
That is for sure. You are in the center of the action. Kristen Fisher, right near the summit site this evening. Kristen, thank you very much for being here. We will be watching throughout the evening as all of this develops. There was some suggestion in reports earlier tonight that the United States negotiators might be considering an option that would allow for some denuclearization to happen perhaps with lifting some of these sanctions. As Kellyanne Conway said earlier, it is going to be a process, and in every deal there are potential concessions to be made, but there'll be a lot of discussion about whether or not any concessions that are made are the best way to go about achieving the goals here in Vietnam. We'll be watching throughout the night. That is the story on a busy Wednesday night. We will be right back here tomorrow night at 7. Exclusive interviews with Newt Gingrich and Jim Jordan.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight you're looking at live pictures from Hanoi, Vietnam, in the northern part of the country. The president's there tonight. He's about to meet with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. We'll be monitoring that live. We'll expect a lot of movement in this hour. We'll play it to you as it happens. But first, a lot going on Capitol Hill today. The circus came to town. The president's former lawyer Michael Cohen testified for most of the daylight hours. Everybody carried it. You probably heard snippets in the Uber on the way to work. You've got a real job. So we watched every moment because we're paid to do that. And most of the day was devoted to the question of Trump's personal character. Now, people in Washington never tire of being shocked by what an incredibly bad man Donald Trump is. They're incredibly good people, and they can just hardly believe his flaws. They sat open-mouthed in the Congress today as Michael Cohen described his former boss, brace yourselves now, as a bit of a con man who has at times overstated his personal wealth. In private, Trump apparently has said offensive things. At one point, Michael Cohen claims Trump used a straw buyer to bid up a portrait of himself at a charity auction. He wanted his picture to go for the highest price. Whoa. Are you shocked yet? Can you believe it? Of course you can. This is exactly the man we knew back in 2015 when he descended the famous escalator, and yet millions of people voted for him anyway. His character was not the point. The point of today's hearings was not his character either. It was supposed to be Russian collusion and obstruction of justice. Those are the topics that have completely derailed the American government for the past 2 years. And on those subjects, we actually did learn quite a bit today. Here's one example. About a month ago, the cat blog BuzzFeed ran an article that claimed Trump had ordered Michael Cohen to lie to the Congress. That's a big deal. It's a crime. And so immediately the hysterics in the Congress and on cable news went bonkers. Impeachment, indictment, life in prison. But did that actually happen? Well, since Cohen was there in person, he was able to conclusively answer that question today, and he did. Watch.
Mr. Cohen, you stood before multiple congressional committees before today and raised your right hand and swore an oath to be honest. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you lied to those congressional committees. Is that correct?
Previously?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
You stated that Trump never directed you to lie to Congress. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it looks like Trump will not be going to jail for suborning perjury after all. Darn, foiled again. Look for a retraction in your latest edition of BuzzFeed. You'll find it just below the 15 cats that look like Ruth Bader Ginsburg listicle. Look carefully. But what about Russian blackmail? You've been hearing about that for years. Trump, they have told you again and again, has somehow been compromised by the Russians. And that's why he's been spying for them. Putin has something horrible and incriminating on Donald Trump. He must. A picture of the president in a Batman costume, maybe. Or a videotape with hookers doing something weird. Certainly Michael Cohen would know about that kind of thing. That's his world. Luckily, a sitting member of Congress asked Cohen about it directly today. Watch.
Are you aware of anything that the president has done at home or abroad that may have subjected him to or may subject him to extortion or blackmail?
I am not, no.
Okay. Are you aware of any videotapes that may be the subject of extortion or blackmail?
I've heard about these tapes for a long time. I've had many people contact me over the years. I have no reason to believe that that tape exists.
The great Jamie Raskin of suburban Maryland, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Mr. Raskin, for clearing that up. So the P-tape is not real. There goes the juiciest part of the Trump dossier, which you'll remember was yet another highly publicized scoop from, yes, BuzzFeed. Could be time to get back to those cat videos, fellas. But wait, what about the trip to Prague that Michael Cohen supposedly took? That was part of his collusion with the dark forces of the Russian Empire. That was in the dossier as well. BuzzFeed told us about it. Surely Cohen would admit it now. He's heading to prison. He's got nothing to lose. Well, Cohen was asked about that Prague trip today, and here's what he said.
You have been to Prague?
I've never been to Prague.
Never have.
I've never been to the Czech Republic.
You might balance my time.
This is where it gets confusing. Never been to Prague. This is the point at which what they call the narrative starts to break down a little bit. If Michael Cohen never went to Prague, as BuzzFeed and Adam Schiff and the entire primetime lineup of MSNBC have told us repeatedly that he did, then how exactly did Michael Cohen collude with the Russians to steal the 2016 presidential election from its rightful winner, Hillary Clinton? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, as incisive an interviewer as the Democrats have, wondered that too. Here's the exchange.
Based on what you know, would Mr. Trump, or did he, lie about colluding and coordinating with the Russians at any point during the campaign?
So as I stated in my testimony, I wouldn't use the word colluding. Was there something odd about the back and forth praise with President Putin? Yes. But I'm not really sure that I can answer that question in terms of collusion.
Oh, wait, so there's no collusion, there's no Russian blackmail, there's no obstruction of justice, there are none of the things that our entire media class has spent the last 2 years huffing and speculating wildly about. Keep in mind that Michael Cohen is Trump's personal lawyer of 10 years. He now hates Donald Trump and would like to destroy him. He has said that again and again. If Michael Cohen had the dime, he would drop it. But he doesn't. There is nothing there. It was all a lie. Can we go home now? Nope. We've got 2 more days of stuff just like this. 2 more days of exchanges like this one, where members of Congress feel that they're not only dumber than you thought they were, but they're a lot creepier.
Can he be blackmailed because of his financial and business ventures, including by foreign governments?
Is there a love child?
There is not, to the best of my knowledge.
So you would...
Do you have any knowledge of President Trump abusing any controlled substances?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Do you have any knowledge of President Trump arranging any health care procedures for any women not in his family?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Is there a love child? Is he a dope head? Did he pay for abortions? No, 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 no. By the end, you start feeling kind of bad for Michael Cohen, honestly. He's not a genius. Anyone who knows him will affirm that. He's in his 50s now, and he's headed to prison. And that's a long way from where he expected to be. Cohen showed up in Washington 2 years ago, anticipating that he'd be the kind of guy, the kind of mover and shaker, who'd be welcome at any restaurant in town. Part the seas for Michael Cohen. Now he's going to be eating sloppy joes off a metal tray with 1,000 other creeps in identical polyester uniforms in the lockup. So take the politics out of it for a minute if you can. Let's be honest, this is a sad story. Michael Cohen is a broken and desperate man, but nobody cares. Democrats cheered for his conviction on ludicrous, absurd campaign finance charges, as if paying off somebody's girlfriend is a campaign finance violation. It's laughable, but they don't care. Now they're squeezing whatever use they can out of Michael Cohen as he shuffles off to his cell. What do the rest of us get out of this? We learn that Trump is vain and vulgar. Okay. What do we do with that information? Is it supposed to make us support open borders, late-term abortion, the war in Syria, the Green New Deal? Will it make the drug epidemic go away? Will it make the suicide rate drop? Will it make housing affordable in the cities? What does it have to do with anything? Well, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. And that is exactly the point of it. That's why this is going on forever. The more time they waste yelping about Trump's charity auction scam in his naughty language in private, the less time they have to explain why they've run this country into the ground and gotten rich doing it. This is a distraction, and we are falling for it, for the record. Congressman Mark Green was at today's hearing, and he joins us now. Congressman, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
So again and again, and I'm not defending the character of Michael Cohen. I'm not defending the character of anybody in Washington, actually, because why would I? He's clearly a liar. On the other hand, he said a bunch of things that he would have no reason to lie about. It seems like he would have every incentive, since he dislikes Trump so much. He would admit if he knew that Trump had a love child, a drug addiction, paid for an abortion, was colluding with the Russians, if the P-tape was real, all of this stuff. And he said it wasn't. So why is that not kind of significant?
No, I think it's a great point that he's, you know, the real story is what he didn't say today. You know, the things that you brought up in your monologue before, and, you know, the P-tape and all this other stuff. I mean, we're not talking about that. He did talk about, you know, the accusations with the payoffs, and of course, you know, the buying of the painting, you know, ridiculous stuff.
And by the way, let me just say for the record, that buying and the painting thing sounds totally true to me. I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, I have no idea, but that's
what difference does it make?
Something Trump would do. I think every Trump voter thinks that's something Trump would do. Like, whatever.
Yeah, what difference does it make, right? I mean, it has nothing to do with what they are trying to do today. And the left is trying, the Democrats are trying to begin an impeachment process. They started with a fake dossier to get an FBI investigation going, and now they're starting with a fake witness to get the impeachment going. That's their agenda, and this is the best they've got. This is their star witness, a guy who lied on his bank loans, a guy who lied 5 times to the IRS, lied to Congress. I mean, their lead testimony to Congress is a guy who lied to Congress. It's the best they've got, and that's what they're trying to do.
I mean, I'm sincerely confused by this. So let's say you're having an extramarital affair, as many members of Congress do, as you know, and your girlfriend tries to extort money from you. I'm going to tell people unless you pay me, and you pay her. Is it a crime to crumble in the face of an extortion plot?
Actually, there are a lot of debates out there. Most people don't think it was a crime. And most people think that Michael Cohen probably didn't need to plead to that. That's what many people are saying. Many of the legal experts, you know, why he did, I don't know. But his other crimes are real.
But can I just ask, I mean, many members of Congress, we know for a fact, have paid off sexual harassment claims. Members of Congress are elected every 2 years, so every one of those would be a campaign finance violation, no?
Yeah, if they use campaign funds, absolutely.
No, but Trump didn't use private funds.
Yeah, as far as I know, the way it went down here, that's not. I mean, what Michael Cohen did is not a crime.
It's the whole thing is so nuts. Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show, Doug.
Michael Caputo is a former advisor to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. He knows Cohen well, of course, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Caputo, thanks very much for coming on. What did you make of this?
Well, I went as pretty much as I thought it would. I think if America were to get what we deserve, we'd see John Lovett as Michael Cohen on Saturday Night Live, the president of the Pathological Liars Association of America. But of course, we're not going to get that. The Democrats in Hollywood want us to believe Michael Cohen. But I saw 2 or 3 times in this hearing where Michael Cohen couldn't resist lying again. I mean, for example, when he talked about how it was his idea that President Trump run for president in 2011 for the 2012 cycle, that couldn't be further from the truth. There was a whole team put together by Roger Stone that was already in motion trying to get the president into the game when Michael Cohen came along and joined up on the team and started a group called something like Should Trump Run? And the reason he was given leadership of that group is because he promised President Trump that he would raise $2 to $3 million At the end of that whole flirtation with the campaign, Michael Cohen had raised $16,000. So the idea that it was his, idea for the president to run in 2012 is a lie. He lied right to the committee's face. Again, and of course, we had that whole thing with his foreign contracts, and they're going to refer that for an investigation. I think they should refer for investigation his whole claim, this prideful claim, that it was his idea that the president run in 2012. It's preposterous.
So I've heard a lot today from Republicans about how Michael Cohen is lying, and I'm willing to believe anything, of course. But do you think that he was lying in the exculpatory statements, in effect, he made about the president, that none of these BuzzFeed theories are real, and he would know? Is he lying about that?
I don't know. I think the Congress has a heck of a job from yesterday, today, and the next couple of times he's in front of committees to sort through what's a lie and what's truth. And I think peppering your lies with a little dollop of truth is one of the best strategies of a pathological liar, right? So I think the Congress is going to have a tough time to figure out what Michael Cohen, what he's saying, whether it's a lie or whether it's truthful. And the idea that he's their star witness is really hilarious. It's just John Lovett. And by the way, Tucker, John Lovett looks like him. He sounds like him. They got to do it on Saturday night.
So can I just ask you why? I mean, you know him, I think, pretty well. I know him, actually. He always struck me as a little slow. I don't hate him or anything. But only a dumb person would plead to a campaign finance violation for paying off somebody's girlfriend. That's not a campaign finance violation. Why would he plead to that?
I think he's being told to do what he's doing. I think it's all about the Rule 35 that he talked about during his testimony today. Rule 35 is a motion that the prosecutors put in to reduce somebody's sentence for substantial assistance. And I talked to a couple of former U.S. attorneys, real pipe swingers today, who said that what Michael Cohen is doing is selling a narrative, trying to get the public to buy off on it, so that, for example, the U.S. attorney, the special counsel's office can get Roger Stone for being on speakerphone when anybody who knows Donald Trump and knows Roger Stone knows that would never happen. The president wouldn't put him on speakerphone any more than Roger Stone would let anyone listen into any of his conversations with the president.
That is true.
It would
I know
never
that
happen.
for a fact. No, that is
Never.
totally.
Never.
You'd hate to think a prosecutor would be involved in a propaganda effort, and the press would sort of nod along with.
Well, it's all this Rule 35 thing. Pay attention to that. It's Rule 35.
I get it.
He's in for 3 years.
I'm the only person in America who feels a little sorry for him, but I do. Mr. Caputo, thank you very much. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Michael Tracy is an independent journalist and a pretty wise man, we'd say. He joins us tonight. You've been following the Russia stuff since the very beginning. I think you're a liberal, by the way. I should just say that. But you've been skeptical about the Russia narrative, as they say on CNN. Did what you heard today change your view?
Absolutely not. In fact, it reinforced my view that much of what has been touted as smoking gun evidence of Russian collusion since the beginning of this sordid ordeal has actually not been borne out. I think a line of questioning that was used by Representative Ro Khanna, who's an independent thinker, he's a Democrat, but
yeah, he is.
You've had him on your show.
I like him.
Yeah, I think he actually had an interesting approach here. He speculated that perhaps the actual smoking gun in this whole episode was not anything to do with Mueller or Russia, but just garden variety financial fraud. Those were his words, stemming from this hush money payment that Michael Cohen supposedly gave Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election, and the way that Trump and his associates repaid that payment to Cohen may have constituted some financial fraud. I don't know if that's true, but at least that's a rational mode of inquiry, and it's sensible. But what's not rational is the way that Democrats have approached this Russia matter, especially with regard to Cohen. I don't know if you've been following the coverage on the other networks and in the other media outlets, but they've been so excited that they've been trembling with glee about this revelation from Cohen that he apparently overheard a conversation between Donald Trump and Roger Stone sometime in late July 2016, where Stone apparently confided that he had a phone conversation with Julian Assange. And there's no independent evidence for that whatsoever. Mueller, as you know, just indicted Roger Stone last month on charges that relate to his claimed communications with WikiLeaks. And Mueller, who has access to all the pertinent phone records and every other record under the sun, made no mention of this supposed phone call that transpired on this date. I think Cohen said it was either July 18th or 19th, 2016. So either Mueller is totally is a total failure in terms of his investigative prowess, or there's something else going on. I don't have to tell you, Tucker, but I think Roger Stone has developed a reputation, rightfully so, as a bit of a fabulist. And he's not always characterized his communications with WikiLeaks totally accurately. I think that may have been the case here. But you know,
he may go to prison for bragging.
Right.
I don't know, I'm laughing.
Well,
it's tragic, but yes, I think that's probably right.
So, I mean, that was the big takeaway. And if that's the big takeaway, then this whole narrative is on flimsier ground than even I thought from the beginning, and I always thought it was pretty darn flimsy.
Meanwhile, we're like moving toward war with a nuclear-armed power that we have no cause to be an enemy of. The whole thing is bizarre. And I, by the way, I would say to any of our viewers who don't know who you are, Michael Tracy, that you're the one thing on Twitter worth reading, I would say. So thanks a lot for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, the Michael Cohen drama proceeds on Capitol Hill. A very different scene is unfolding in Southeast Asia. The president's summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is underway. Brett Baer, Ed Henry. The White House wants to remain focused on the summit in Vietnam, but it would be foolish to think they have paid no attention to the testimony before Congress today of Michael Cohen. How is the administration reacting to all that has happened here in Washington? Special report host Brett Baer is in Hanoi tonight, but following everything that's happening here, and he's here to tell us. Hey, Brett.
Hey, Tucker.
So how are the traveling White House press people responding to what we've been watching?
Well, they're paying attention, obviously, to the Michael Cohen hearing. Obviously watched it a lot. We didn't get a lot from the White House in reaction. Jay Sekulow put out a statement saying that one element of the testimony was completely wrong. No full tweet from the president other than retweeting what he retweeted before. Our best inclination about the president's view of all of this was a statement from Senator Lindsey Graham in which he said he had a phone call with President Trump, and he said he was kind of angry that there was this split screen of the Hanoi, North Korea-U.S. summit and Michael Cohen's testimony. As you're getting ready to see the motorcade leave here, we're at the JW Marriott as well. The president will head down to the Metropole Hotel and have a one-on-one summit meeting bilateral with the North Korean leader. And then there's a full day of events, including a working lunch. Really, the focus has been what the tangible things are going to be out of this summit and not Michael Cohen's back and forth.
Huh. Interesting. Does the White House seem optimistic about being able to announce something meaningful after this meeting?
Yeah, I had a number of conversations on background with a few officials. I've talked to other people who say they don't know until it happens. This is different than other summits where teams of diplomats go in and kind of iron out all the details and the minutia, and then the principals come in and just sign the paper. This has to do with the one-on-one personalities of President Trump and Kim Jong-un about what Kim is going to agree to or not, and whether the U.S. is going to hold the line on denuclearization. Everything I'm hearing is they want to define success as getting Kim to give up his nuclear weapons to see the economic success of a place like here in Vietnam or Singapore, the site of the first summit.
That's a big ask to go into this. What are they threatening if they don't get it?
Well, I mean, that's it. So what does success look like? What does failure look like? Success looks like maybe incrementally getting inspectors, getting a verifiable system in place, getting a timeline when things actually are going to happen. As you see the motorcade rolling here from the JW Marriott, the Beast there with the president inside. And it's about a 15-minute drive across town. Security is really tight, but not for these guys. And then failure looks like it just falls apart, and the maximum pressure of sanctions comes back in play. And neither party wants that. And I can tell you this, the people in Vietnam who I've talked to, the people in South Korea who we've been talking to, Greg Palcott there, really want this to work. They want this peace to happen just for the region.
So let me just ask you finally, a number of people here are saying, including the president's son, Don Jr., that everything that is playing out with Michael Cohen, these hearings in the Congress that we saw today, undermine the president's hand in these negotiations. Do you think that's true, and does the White House think that's true?
I don't think they think that. I think they think it distracts the attention. You know, the hearings happened today. The meetings really, now it's today, it's tomorrow your time, and the summit goes all day this day here in Hanoi. So, you know, the coverage will come back to the summit after a day of being up on Capitol Hill. Does it distract? Yes. Does it diminish? No. If they get deliverables out of this summit, anything that's substantial, history has a long view, and Michael Cohen will not be a big part of history if that happens.
No. Either way, I doubt he'll be a chapter. Brett Baer, live from Hanoi. Thank you very much for that.
See you, Tucker.
So what can we realistically expect out of the summit we're watching tonight in Hanoi? Harry Kazianis is Director of Korean Studies at the Center for the National Interest, and he joins us tonight. Harry, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So give us the overview of what the point, the object of this meeting is.
Well, Tucker, I think we have to really think about how this has changed in terms of what the White House was saying back in 2017 and today. Everything was about denuclearization. And I think that's still a big point. But what the president has been doing and sort of foreshadowing on Twitter and all his statements is talking about peace. And we have to think about this. How do we incent Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear weapons? I think there's only one way to do that, is to end the Korean War. I think what you're going to see today is both parties signing an end-of-war declaration that formally ends this. And I think what that'll do is that'll allow Donald Trump to say, Kim Jong-un, we're no longer enemies anymore. I'm not a threat. I'm not going to invoke regime change on you. Now you are able to release your nuclear weapons. And at least we'll know at that point if Kim is actually serious about doing this. And I think that's what we're going to see. There are a couple other things, but I think that's the biggest thing.
Ending the war after 65 years. What are the tangible consequences of being at war as a diplomatic matter with North Korea? I mean, will it improve life for North Korea if the war officially ends?
Well, think about it this way. Kim Jong-un would be able to go back to Pyongyang. He'd be able to talk to his generals, the party cadre around him, and say, look, we are no longer enemies anymore. For once, I feel like I can trust the United States. I feel like we have a relationship. It changes the whole dynamic of this relationship. If there's not a war, Kim can actually go to his people and say, you know what, we don't need to invest billions of dollars in nuclear weapons anymore, and at least we can start the process to denuclearize. And that's important. It gives him that opportunity.
It's always been said that China is the pivotal unspoken player in all this. What's their position? What do they want out of it?
Well, I think China is probably concerned that actually Kim Jong-un may actually start moving closer to Seoul in the United States. Because remember, China uses North Korea as a buffer against Seoul and against U.S. forces that are actually in Korea. So the Chinese are very worried that someday that there would be reunification. And let me tell you something, a reunified South Korea would have trillions of dollars of minerals. Seoul would actually have a very cheap and entrepreneurial labor force to actually rebuild. Seoul would be a power. They would be a powerhouse, and China does not want that. So I'm a little worried about China's motives here.
So you believe that the government of South Korea would like to reunify the country?
Eventually, yeah. I mean, they have unification ministries. They have scholars on staff that are researching this and trying to figure this out. And I think someday it will happen. We may even see it in our lifetime.
What do you think the president will announce when this is over?
I think there's a few things. I think a peace declaration that'll end the war. I think we're going to see that. I think there's going to be liaison offices, and that's critically important here. I know a lot of people have downed that, Tucker, and said, oh, it's a concession. You're giving something up to the North Koreans. Well, Tucker, I've never heard of talking as being a concession. That's what the neoconservatives say, and I think it's garbage, to be honest with you. Think about it if we had a Cuban Missile Crisis, and we weren't able to talk to the Soviets and work our way through that and have ambassadors. We need to be able to talk to our adversaries. So I think that's important. I think what you're also going to see is the closure, full closure of the Yongbyon nuclear facility, which is actually the flagship facility of North Korea's nuclear program. Some people have said it's older, it's breaking down, but it actually helps the North Koreans build hydrogen bombs. So I think that's a key component. And we're probably going to see a big announcement in terms of U.S. and North Korean teams actually going on the ground to battlefields where the Korean War happened and doing excavation work and working together. Those people-to-people ties, they're important.
Will North Korea have in some way to atone for, apologize for, make good for the many misdeeds it's committed, killing Otto Warmbier, the UVA student, for example, kidnapping Japanese citizens, running concentration camps? Will they have to acknowledge we did this, do you think?
I think they have to. I mean, I think they understand, and I think Kim Jong-un realizes that there's going to be a limit to how far the United States can go Denuclearization is important. Lessening tensions is important. But let's face it, the North Koreans cannot be a regime that's a human rights monster. There's no way that the United States or Donald Trump is going to be able to go back to the American public with all this great news if the North Koreans aren't willing to change at least a little. And I think that's going to happen slowly. It might take years, but I think Kim gets that.
And let me just end by asking you the question that I just asked Bret Baier in Hanoi. Do you think that domestic politics, the attacks on Trump by Michael Cohen today, affect the president's ability to negotiate this deal with North Korea?
No. And the reason I say that is I think Donald Trump understands that this is the time to make history. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to end the Korean War and actually have peace. Because this is the thing, Tucker. We sat here in 2017, and let me tell you, we came close to nuclear war. I think the president's going to have blinders on, and I think he's going to bring this home.
Interesting. Harry, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Great to see you. We'll continue to monitor everything that is happening in Hanoi, Vietnam tonight and keep these live images on the screen. The President's Summit is meant to avert a possible war on the Korean Peninsula. But on the other side of the planet, war is looking more likely by the day. In Venezuela, the socialist government of Nicolas Maduro is falling apart, and more voices in the U.S. suggest it is our duty to launch a military intervention to overthrow him. Consequences be damned. David Tafuri is an international lawyer and former advisor to Barack Obama's presidential campaigns. He joins us tonight. David, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks
so let me ask you the question of Venezuela that I've asked you of Syria and of Yemen and of Libya and of Iraq. How is it in America's interest directly to effect regime change, to overthrow the government of Nicolas Maduro?
Well, I don't agree with you that many people in Washington are calling for the U.S. to intervene right now. It is, but the U.S. does.
I don't know where you are right now. Come back to Washington. You can hear
I'm in New York. I just left Washington yesterday. But I do think that this administration would like to see regime change, and through sanctions and other sort of soft power techniques is pushing for regime change, and I think that's appropriate. The problem in Venezuela is a completely failed state. It has an authoritarian dictator who's plunged the country into complete desperation, and that's creating a very negative humanitarian situation. It's creating refugees who are fanning out all over South America, Latin America. Some of them are going to come here to the U.S. More refugees have applied for asylum in the U.S. than from any other country this year. It's a problem for America, and it's a problem for this hemisphere. It's also a humanitarian, it's also a human rights problem. Several people have been killed at the border just because other countries are trying to bring in food aid. So this is something the U.S. has to be concerned about. Anytime a country completely becomes a failed state, it's a place where drugs can come through. It's a place that can support terrorism.
You don't need to convince
Those are all
me.
things we should worry about.
I've watched as the left, the neocons, Bill Kristol and friends, Barack Obama, Samantha Power, Hillary Clinton toppled dictator, and George W. Bush, for that matter, toppled dictator after dictator, leaving smoking craters in their wake, failed states that have made the world worse. So I completely agree with you 100% in what you just said. But why wouldn't our overriding concern be a wave of refugees coming across our border? Pretty much the last thing we need in a country with as many problems as we have. Why shouldn't that be job number one, prevent a wave of refugees from coming to our country?
Well, I agree with you, but regime change would probably lessen the amount of refugees. Already, as I mentioned, there are tons of refugees coming out of Maduro's Venezuela. That's a big problem, and it's only going to get worse until Maduro's gone. None of the economic, policies that he's put in place have helped. They've made it worse. There's huge inflation. The economy is dying, and so he has to go. He's no longer a legitimate leader. That's why President Trump recognized the opposition leader as the legitimate leader of Venezuela.
He's appalling, and as was Chavez before him. And it's a shame that so many on the American left have supported the members of the Kennedy family. Bernie Sanders. I mean, I'm not going to defend Maduro. Why would I? I am standing back in shock as John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, encourages, various countries to offer asylum to refugees as Republicans in the House suggest giving refugee status to Venezuelan refugees. Why should the United States bear the burden of socialism in Venezuela? I'm completely confused.
Well, it's not the burden of socialism. It's the effort to prevent a failed state, because a failed state is going to hurt us. When you talk about doing an intervention...
No, but I'm asking I'm sorry, maybe it wasn't clear. Okay. Why are people in the United States agitating for us to bring in refugees from Venezuela? Why should we have to pay the price for the insane socialist policies of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro? I don't understand.
Well, you know, America has a history of bringing in refugees. We shouldn't always have to shoulder the burden. It should be countries all over the world. Refugees should be accepted all over the world. There's lots of reasons why you need to have refugees to be able to go somewhere else. I mean, it's a humanitarian reason. You also want to support, but let me just finish. You want to support that. You want to support political dissidents who are pushing for a country to become a democratic country, to become a pro-Western, pro-American country. So when those dissidents end up having their lives threatened because they talk positively about America, because they cooperated with America, and they have to leave, they're running for their lives, they need somewhere to go. That's how we encourage them. That's how we encourage them to support our policies.
Are we still pretending that democracy, look, I despise the Venezuelan government. I think they're evil, okay? So I just want to be clear about that.
We agree on that.
But why are we pretending that the goal for every country around the world should be democracy? Do we want it in Jordan? Do we want it in Saudi Arabia? I mean, that is like a 2003 talking point that has turned out to be ridiculous. We don't want democracy in every country around the world. That shouldn't be the goal. What are you talking about?
It's been a bipartisan policy.
I know, that's the problem.
Both the Republicans and the Democrats to spread democracy. I mean, that goes all the way back. Because that goes all the way back to our founding fathers, Tucker. I mean, they supported...
No, the founding fathers were not neocons.
They said people should be able to decide... People should be able to decide who their leaders are.
Yeah,
they should be able to vote for their leaders. They should have freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of press. Those are things that Venezuela does not have. Okay, so we should support that.
Okay, but hold on. Why are we pretending that democracy is a panacea? We know from the experience in Iraq, where we topple the dictator and impose a democracy on the population, that it did not work at all. And the main effect, according to the new report from the Army War College, was to make Iran more powerful. So like the democracy talking point, don't you think it ought to go to, I'm just pulling this out of the air, the dustbin of history at this point, or no?
It's like someone said, democracy is the worst form of government except for every other one. Democracy is imperfect.
Really?
But it supports individual rights. It supports our values. And right now, we're basically in a competition with China and Russia, who have a very different vision for the world. They are not democratic countries. They don't believe in democracy. They believe in their form of kleptocracy and authoritarianism. And they want to spread that. So we're countering with democracy.
We're fighting Russia again. Okay,
and
right.
If democracies fall and if democracies fall and become authoritarian countries, that ultimately will threaten us. We are in a community of democracies.
I'm sorry, George W. Bush. That's been proved not true. Really quick, would you like Jordan to become a democracy? It's a dictatorship now. It's run literally by a king. Okay, it's a police state. Do we want to have free and fair elections in Jordan tomorrow? Who would that be good for? Well,
Eventually, all of these countries are moving towards democracy. Even a place like Jordan is becoming more democratic.
Let's hope not. I hope not. I'm on the king's side there. I'm sorry. I'm not for it. Call me names. Great to see you, David. Thank you.
Great to see you, Tucker.
Ed Henry joins us with more. He is in Hanoi right now. If something interesting has happened, Ed Henry will know about it. Ed, what is happening?
Tucker, do I have an interesting nugget for you? You see the motorcade there arriving at the Metropole Hotel. It's a classic French colonial style hotel. You know it. Very famous here in Hanoi. They had talks there day one yesterday, day two now. We're expecting maybe even a poolside chat between these two leaders. Here's what's interesting, the nugget. The president's motorcade, known as the Beast, just arrived. You know that's about $1.5 million for the president of the United States limo because of all the security concerns, the tires, everything is specially done by GM and Cadillac. But we did some digging. Kim Jong-un's limo, you've seen the pictures of the synchronized swimmers almost, the security cordon around him. It's a Mercedes Maybach that cost $1.6 million. Why is that significant? They manufacture cars in North Korea, a small number, and you see that Mercedes Maybach there with the synchronized swimmers running around essentially. They manufacture cars in North Korea that are only worth about $10,000, okay? And the average annual income in North Korea is $1,300. It gives you some perspective, A, about why Kim Jong-un as he enters these talks with President Trump. Maybe a little nervous, sleeps with one eye open about a not so tight grip on power, because he's got people making $1,300 a year as an average annual income in his country. He's riding around in a $1.6 million Mercedes Maybach. And the other point is that he has a taste for capitalism. And you mentioned this a few moments ago with Brett. He wants the finer things in life. He wants to perhaps see some market reforms in North Korea and get a taste of what it's like for the wealthier folks here in Vietnam, which once had an economy that was in the pits as well, like North Korea now, and would like to see it all opened up. So this is the person that President Trump is sitting down with to try and forge peace, Tucker.
Amazing. I think at one point North Korea was the world's largest consumer of Courvoisier cognac. Quite a worker's paradise.
Yesterday, Dutch officials were told seized, I think, 80,000 bottles of vodka that were headed for Kim Jong-un's inner circle in North Korea. Because of the sanctions, of course, you can't bring that vodka in. But you have to wonder, did they think they were about to celebrate some sort of a big deal with 80,000 bottles of vodka? I mean, even if they do forge world peace, that's a lot of vodka.
It's a lot of vodka. That's a Russian level of vodka. So I want to play, we've got some sound for you I want you to react to. This is Donald Trump after the first North Korean summit. Watch.
I want to thank Chairman Kim for taking the first bold step toward a bright new future for his people. Our unprecedented meeting, the first between an American president and a leader of North Korea, proves that real change is indeed possible. My meeting with Chairman Kim was honest, direct, and productive. We got to know each other well in a very confined period of time, under very strong circumstance. We're prepared to start a new history, and we're ready to write a new chapter between our nations. As history has proven over and over again, adversaries can indeed become friends. We can honor the sacrifice of our forefathers by replacing the horrors of battle with the blessings of peace.
So Ed, what's striking about that, I wouldn't exactly call the tone warm, but the president dared to talk about the leader of North Korea as a human being. He took some criticism for that. Do you expect a similar posture after today's meeting?
Absolutely. A few hours ago when they first sat down and had some handshakes here in what was day one, basically President Trump was saying we've got such a warm relationship. I think we've surprised the world with that. Of course, they've written, lovey-dovey letters. At one point, President Trump said out on the campaign trail before the midterms that they fell in love. You're right. That sort of raises some eyebrows when you have the human rights record of Kim Jong-un, the 100,000 people in North Korea, we should remember, who are in the gulag system as we speak. On the other hand, if you're going to make peace, you got to deal with some really bad actors on the world stage, and that's the bargain this president is dealing with. And I want to point out something. Nicholas Kristof in the New York Times, one of the guys we're supposed to be told is so smart on foreign policy. In my research for this trip, April 20th, 2017, headline, "The North Korea Trump Nightmare." And the lead says President Trump is scary in many ways, but perhaps the most frightening nightmare is of him blundering us into a new Korean war. Tucker, that was April 2017. So my point is all the smart people, quote unquote, on foreign policy have been wrong again and again about President Trump, particularly his approach to North Korea. So to your point, it's not great when you got to jump into bed with someone like Kim Jong-un, but if he comes out of this with some kind of measure of peace, I think a lot of the quote unquote smart people are going to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I think they're administering an inverse IQ test at the HR department over at the New York Times. It's amazing. Ed, it's great to see you, Ed. Thank you for that.
Good to see you as always.
Well, for more reaction tonight to the president's imminent summit with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, we're joined by former Trump State Department senior advisor Christian Whiten. Christian, it's great to see you tonight. So how would you describe the significance of what we're watching on the screen right now?
Well, it's a big deal. It may not be quite as big as some people are making. There are a lot of sort of weird expectations out there. A lot of people who've said, and they said this when Kim went to Singapore too, like, oh my God, he's going to see almost capitalism in Hanoi and he's going to want this for his people. I really don't think that. He actually went to a fancy boarding school in Switzerland before when he was young. He's seen parts of the world. He knows that his system doesn't deliver for his people. He doesn't actually care about that. I mean, he is at the end of the day a dictator. Similarly, you're seeing expectations, people who are saying that Donald Trump has already lost. He's given up on total denuclearization, that he's going to just accept some peace deal for the appearance of it, consider that some big victory. I don't think that's realistic either. I think Donald Trump wants to win, not in sort of a PR photo op sense, but in a real way. So, you know, I think some of the expectations are wrong. What they really are going to probably do is try and work for some incremental steps at disarmament, including things like, you know, boring things, inspections, discussions about plutonium-239 and uranium-235 and things like that.
So that would, do you think, I mean, that's the benchmark that you would set for victory if tomorrow or whenever this finishes, we're told that they have agreed to some sort of inspection regimen and future talks, that's a win?
No, I don't think so. But the ideal, which is here are our finished nuclear weapons, here is our stockpile of plutonium, here are our centrifuges, here is all of the nuclear waste, which is actually, you know, fuel that can be processed into warhead material, and you can have all that and send it to Oak Ridge. That's unlikely, but I think something that is a significant timeline. I mean, if Singapore was a meeting of the minds between Trump and Kim on the end state, if this is the sequencing, they want goodies. They want sanctions relief and economic assistance, which could come from South Korea. We want the nuclear material. It's the sequencing and the sort of those things can happen in parallel, and also some process so that this can be decided below the leader level. If you talk to people on the U.S. team, they actually are in communication with the North Koreans. North Koreans have been afraid to make decisions for good reason, because if they make a mistake, they can be executed.
Yeah, that'll focus the mind. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty tough ask. I mean, if I'm a small, backward hermit kingdom and all I have is nuclear weapons, that's probably the last thing I'm ever going to want to give up.
Yeah, exactly right. And, you know, Kim, they have a big army, but we saw with some one defector who crossed the DMZ, I mean, these are young men who are like on the brink of starvation often. They have to pay for their own uniforms. This is not an army that's going to march into South Korea or that could actually defend North Korea from a conventional war. They've seen what our weapons can do in other places. I'm not trying to defend what they've done or the way they run the country, but yes, what's the difference between North Korea and another sort of poor, dumpy dictatorship like Belarus? Well, it's their nuclear weapons. That's their one chip in the game, and they're not going to give it away flippantly.
Yeah. What do you think China wants?
China, you know, I think has always appreciated North Korea. They've said that they don't want North Korea to be nuclear. I don't necessarily believe that. They know those nukes are never going to be used on China. You know, it's sort of like their eccentric little cousin that causes problems for their enemy, which is us. You know, a buffer. I think the Chinese know we're not going to invade Asia with the 28,000 guys we have in South Korea. You'd have to add 2 zeros to that number.